Today, the webinar is focused on product development with Susan Weaver from Pearl Strategy and Innovation Design. We were introduced to Pearl a couple of months ago, and we quickly realized that they have a lot to offer to companies who are developing products, and particularly in the natural product space. If you go to their website, you'll see that they have been providing some valuable reports on Canadian attitudes and opinions about health and wellness, and that's definitely one of the areas that we are focused on in the natural product space. If you sign up for their newsletters, you can get the reports that they have, which are very helpful, and also particularly of interest to people who are on the call today, you'll be able to get the 3D innovation guide. So before we move right into it, I'll just give you a little bit about Susan. Before she started the Pearl Strategy Company, she gained all sorts of behind-the-scenes expertise in marketing, sales, and innovation at some pretty major companies like Johnson & Johnson, SmithKline Beecham, and Kellogg's, who are, as you know, all in at least in some part, in areas that are related to natural products. So with all of that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan to take over the slideshow now. I guess we will just go from here. If you do have questions, you can send me a chat message, and then I will be able to alert Susan that there's a question, and she'll also take a little pause in between each slide, so that if you want to ask a question, then I'll be able to take you off mute, and as long as you let me know in the chat, I can take you off mute, and we can have a little bit of a back and forth in this, so it's more of a discussion versus just Susan talking at you, because I'm sure she doesn't want that, and it'd be a lot more valuable for all of you. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan. I have to unmute her and hand over the controls to her. Susan, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thanks a lot, Sue, and welcome everyone. We're excited to be able to provide this presentation to you. And you know what, it is very casual, so definitely if you have questions or you need more details, just let us know. And I believe that I can get you out before the 1 hour, so we should be in good shape. Okay, so Sue, you've given me control, right?
Yes, so you should be able to advance the slides. There you go.
Okay, so working? Okay, great. So let's just cover off the agenda and our objectives. So before we actually get into the innovation process, I thought it was valuable to, I don't know what that square is.
Are you seeing a
square? Yeah, I'm seeing some kind of square. I don't know if
it's the chat. Is it gone?
Okay. Yeah, it's gone.
Perfect.
Okay, so yeah, before we get started on the process, I thought it would be useful just to kind of do a bit of context, a little bit about the definition of innovation, the importance of it, some common pitfalls, and also just some examples of good, best-in-class innovators. And then we'll actually get into the process itself. We'll just do stage 1 today, and I believe in 2 weeks, Sue, we have the second and third stage that we'll offer, because it is quite a detailed process. So you're welcome to come back for that. So really, the objectives today are just to teach you an innovation process that you can replicate with your team. So this is actually meant to be a process, to teach you a process that you could use, kind of your do-it-yourself process. It's also something that we do at Pearl, but this is one, we developed a guide so that people could use it on their own. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm trying to move there. So the ABCs of innovation. So there's lots of different definitions of innovation out there, and when I was kind of preparing for this presentation, I came across this one because it's just very simple, and Forbes is known to be a very innovative company, and so I thought I'd use theirs. But it's really just simple as the introduction of something new or different, the act of innovating that leads to the introduction of new ideas, devices, or methods, and it involves creativity. So creativity plus work results in innovation. So being innovative means that you're able to harness your creative ability. Importance of innovation. So if you think about a lot of the big food companies right now, I'd say a lot of them are not, they're kind of focused on efficiencies and effectiveness, but they're not doing a ton of innovation. They're doing a lot of pricing. You know what? And you see all these big companies not doing that well, because really innovation is what drives a company forward, right? It creates value in the market. It drives growth for a company. The other thing that innovation does is it solves problems that need to be solved. So as we, continue on in this world, we run up against issues or problems, and those companies that can come up with solutions to solve are going to be the ones that do well and have opportunity. And then the last piece is technology is disrupting almost every category. And if you aren't innovative as a company, you're going to fall behind at some point. I always think of Blockbuster as a good example, because who would have ever guessed that DVDs, that you would not be able to, that you would not be going to a Blockbuster to get movies on a Friday night. Now we just, download it from Apple, or we go to Netflix. That company obviously did not see where the future was heading. And so if you think about innovation, you can apply it. It can be product innovation. It could be service innovation. It could apply to a business model. It could apply to processes and functions. So even if I think about, our company, when we stumble on a project, or we stumble in a research project, we sometimes will come back and we'll gather around and we'll say, what happened? What's the opportunity? And how can we apply new approaches to it so that we succeed in the future? So some of the common pitfalls of innovation. It's just taking a little bit of time for the slide to change. So before we actually start about the pitfalls, Harvard Business Review says 90% of new products fail. When in my past life, when we used to use Nielsen information, Nielsen would also say about 80% of products fail. And there's a reason why innovation is risky. So a lot of the times, companies or even entrepreneurs, they think up a product or a service that they can execute, rather than actually thinking about what does the consumer want and how can I serve that consumer. So really, innovation starts with understanding the consumer and having consumer empathy. The other key pitfall is being too narrow in focus. And that's about defining what business you're in. And I thought a good example here is Dove brand. So Dove started out as a soap. That's all they sold. And, then they said, you know what? We think this brand has lots of legs. So, you know what? We want to be a beauty brand, right? So then you see all the new products that they developed under that line, right? Body washes, shampoos, conditioners, all of that. And I would even argue more that Dove is now about women empowerment, right? And women's self-esteem. So it's become even larger than just being a beauty brand. So they've constantly evolved and they've constantly refined what business they were in. Another pitfall is launching new products or services, but losing sight of the core consumer. So a good example, I actually read an article about Applebee's kind of going to millennials and trying to get the millennial business and, changing their menu to appeal to millennials. Well, what happened was their core consumer, which was a lot older, they weren't with them. And so they lost a ton of business. So when you're launching a new product or service, you need to kind of test it against your current business, your current consumers, because you don't want to alienate them. And the last piece is obsessing over your competitors. So following rather than leading. You know, when I was at Kellogg's, we used to talk every day about General Mills. And I was always thinking, like, why do we have to talk about General Mills? Let them do what they do. We need to understand it, but we don't have to follow, right? And you see this in QSR right now with, you know, every time Tim's comes out with a sandwich, Subway's got the same one, or, you know, McDonald's is launching a new coffee and Tim's is launching a new coffee. Well, you know what? If you have like 3 or 4 brands launching at the same time, then you're not really being innovative. Does anyone, so that's kind of a upfront. Does anyone have any questions so far?
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so let's go on. I'm just gonna show you 3 case studies, or not case studies, but 3 examples of brands that I think are innovative. And actually, these were taken from Fast Company's list of most innovative businesses in 2018. And actually, that's a very good resource for the group if they have lots of stuff on content online. They have a website, they have a magazine. Fast Company is a great resource for innovation knowledge. So Apple, what they set out to do is reinvent the phone. But what they really did was they gave people the ability to do things that they couldn't do before. So you'd see just a few examples: accessibility to cameras. You know, household penetration of cameras now is, because everyone's got one in their phone, is like 100%. They also provided accessibility to music and GPS. We all had those little manual GPSs in our cars. Well, I shouldn't say we all did. Some of us had GPSs in our cars, but now that you have a phone, you actually have a GPS too. So they really sort of gave us accessibility to things that we didn't have before. And how they changed our world? Well, they really revolutionized the way we communicate. So, you know, we talk through text now. We communicate through social media. And this has all been, you know, as a result of, you know, Apple launching their phone. The next example is Netflix. So what they set out to do was deliver on-demand online streaming video. So they actually started out as a subscription business where they actually shipped movies to your house. That's how they started. But so they evolved from there, obviously, to an online platform. They improved accessibility to video. And then even beyond that, they started delivering, in the last couple of years, they've really been focused on delivering specialized programming that is more niche. And they talk about it as their goal being so every person can find a show or movie that they can't live without, which is very different from, you know, the big networks, ABC, NBC, who put content on that the majority will like. So they're trying to find that sort of intersection versus, you know, targeting different segments and really, really driving loyalty within those segments. And so how did Netflix change the world? Well, they changed the way we consume entertainment, right? You can, you know, binging on TV, or TV binging wasn't even in the, you know, in the dictionary kind of like a year ago or 2 years ago. We can also watch Netflix on our phones with Netflix Go. The next one is a food brand, because we talked a couple of technology brands. So I don't know if people are that familiar with Trapani, but it is and you guys would, because you're in the natural products space, but it's a Greek yogurt, launched initially in the US, and all natural, no preservatives, Greek yogurt with protein. He set out, the Turkish founder set out to create a better quality yogurt. He believed that the American yogurt wasn't as good as what he had from home. So he decided he was going to do that. And what he actually did was he sort of drove reappraisal of the nutrition credentials of yogurt, because before that, people really thought yogurt was really good food, and it was good, you know, was, healthy. And he kind of really showed that, some of the high sugar yogurts, some of the yogurts that had ingredients that are not so good for you, he basically showed that there's a better way to make yogurt. And I think beyond just being a manufacturer of yogurt, this founder is really all about providing access to communities that are underserved, food banks, especially in sort of like the New York area. He also provides employment to refugees, and this has become part of his brand. And so if you think about how he's changing the world, and I do believe he's influencing culture, particularly in the areas that he's focused on, the New York area, he's really encouraging people to do more and be more. So it's beyond just, selling yogurt. So with that, we just finished those 3 examples. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? I'm going to move on to the, let me move on to that page. So we're going to get into the actual process now. We call it the 3D process: discover, distill, and design. It's meant to be a front-to-end methodology. So what I mean by that is it's meant to start at a higher level, a strategic level, and then it's meant to go all the way to the end to ideas. So it is a process that we recommend doing in a workshop format. You could do it with as little as 6 people if you have a small business. And let's just start out. Today we're just going to cover the discovery section. And this is really all about gathering internal and external facts and insights to create opportunity areas. And opportunity areas could be defined as kind of big consumer need states or spaces. So for example, in food, authenticity often is a opportunity area for companies. And if you think about authenticity, you could deliver that in a food product many different ways. For example, you could have a regionally renowned product, you could have a artisan product, you could have even clean label product would be authentic. So when you develop these opportunity areas, there's like a lot of different kind of platforms that can address that opportunity area. So the discovery section is all about divergent thinking. It's looking at trends and identifying areas of opportunity. And within this phase, there are 7 exercises that I'm going to take you through. So before we start, I wanted to talk to you about the business challenge, because before you actually start the workshop, the group should really align on what the business challenge is. So once a business has identified an opportunity or an issue, they must develop a statement that aligns the team to what it is the business is trying to solve for. And key components of this statement are: it identifies a need, it identifies a target, it's grounded in a category or segment, and it identifies the desired change in metrics or behavior. So, for example, we did some work for a food company not too long ago, and their business challenge statement was around women, 25 to 49, looking for health and wellness products. And they wanted to drive growth across 4 priority brands within their portfolio. So that was actually a pretty good statement. it would have been even better if they would have identified what kind of growth they were looking for, a percentage or an actual amount. But that was a decent business challenge statement. Okay, so we're going to go to exercise 1. Sorry guys, it's taking me a bit of work to get the slide to move. Okay, so exercise 1 is, we call it Search Inside. So this is really a review of existing internal data that you already have. It could be strategies that you've, it could be a business strategy, it could be a brand strategy, your business performance, so sales, profit. It could be research that you've done, and it could be past consumer feedback that you've gotten. Could be through your, could be through social media, could be from, if you have a 1-800 line, anything like that. So the other examples would be innovation business reviews that you've done, brand health reports, things like that. So what we're recommending that you do is assign one person to look through that information and get that person to create a top 10 list from that information. And then within the workshop, then that person that's responsible for that area presents to a group. And the group, while the person's presenting, sort of writes sticky notes like insights or facts or hunches on a sticky note. And then those notes are posted to a large kind of big sheet of paper within the room. And you're going to see the opportunity map at the end, the template, but any type of large piece of paper, and the group is like just capturing thoughts and facts as that person's presenting. And in terms of the definitions, the facts, we would say, are measurable data or observations. Hunches are sort of a gut instinct about an unproven, undiscovered opportunity or issue. And then insights are really the relationship between the need and the behavior. So insights are a little bit trickier to come up with, but data, facts and hunches, those ones are fairly easy to kind of capture. So I won't go through the tips because you have the detailed, but we'll just keep going through the actual exercises themselves. Does anyone have any questions so far? So you think we're okay?
I'm not seeing any questions. If you guys do have questions, please just put a little note in the chat section there and I'll watch for it.
Okay, so going to move to the next exercise. Okay, second exercise is bringing the outside in. So this is a review of external trends, competitive information, and consumer understanding. So again, and I guess there's probably some other ones that we could talk about too. Websites, scanning of websites, competitor websites, Google search on trends is a good idea. And there's always external trend reports like Mintel, Nielsen, NPD. They provide trend data. So again, very similar to the exercise 1. One person gets assigned to the external information. They scan the information. They put a top 10 list together of the most pertinent information. And then that person comes to your workshop and presents. And as that person is presenting, the team is capturing insights, hunches, and facts on a sticky note that's placed onto the opportunity map. And all of these sticky notes are placed randomly placed. They're not going to be clustered just quite yet. Go to the next exercise. The next exercise is engaging the team. So this is about getting feedback and insights from key stakeholders or cross-functional team members. So this is really like your internal team. And what we recommend is doing one-on-one interviews, or you could hold a roundtable. And we like to record those interviews so that we can go back and pull the insights from those interviews later. But the same process again. One person's assigned to this, creates a top 10 list, and then presents it to in the workshop. A good example of this that we tend to use a lot is when we do work for food companies, we'll typically talk with the R&D person, and sometimes the operations person. And, you know, I can say, like, we did some work for Tim Hortons and for their lunch strategy a couple years ago. And we got a lot of great insights from the food developers. And we took those hunches into research and we tested some of them out. And there was some very good nuggets in there from doing those interviews. So similar to the other exercises, a person is assigned to this, does a top 10 list, and then the team posts their sticky notes. The next exercise is listening to stories. And this is really around finding unmet consumer needs or dissatisfiers. So a good example of this was, well, I did a study, or I did training at Rotman in business design, and we were given a case to find a technological solution for this area in health and wellness. And we actually got consumers to bring in their stories about health and wellness. So what they did was we said, go around your house and take pictures of, you know, what health and wellness means to you. So then when we got them in on one-on-one interviews, they actually showed us the pictures and told us stories about why the things they were showing us were about health and wellness. And that was very broad, but then we applied those insights to the actual case challenge and came up with a product and service that would deliver in this area. So one-on-one interviews are with consumers are good. Now, some people, if you don't have a lot of resources to be able to afford research, other companies we've worked with actually use employees. Or there's other ways that you can incentivize consumers to, you know, to come and talk to you. Like, for example, I know Tim sometimes gives Tim cards, for example. So there's things that you can do that are not necessarily that expensive and still get a consumer read. So again, one person's assigned to this, captures the top 10 list, and brings it back to the group. The group ideates or writes insights, and they are posted to the opportunity map. Okay. Learn from the experts. So this one is around gathering data and insights from experts that bring new perspectives of your consumer target. So this could be, in the past, we've used experts like nutritionists. If we're in the food space, we've used a US company came to us and said they wanted to launch into Canada. And so we brought a anthropologist into the project so that he could help us translate, you know, the differences between Canada and the US and like what it would need for that brand. We've used, when we've done work in food, we've also used educators. Chefs are another area as well. So whoever it is that you think may bring a different perspective, you can bring them in. Again, you do one-on-one interviews, or you do a roundtable, you record the session, and then that person, so that information is then translated into the workshop, just the same way, presented on a top 10 list. Okay, so that's kind of like a lot of the, so picture a big page on the wall with like a ton of sticky notes on it, and they're all randomly placed. So now that was kind of all of the information kind of dump, if you will. And then now we're actually going to go and we're going to move this information around into, what could be opportunity spaces. So we talk about clustering. So so what we do is we look for sticky notes that have similar words on them, and we try to cluster them. Then we start looking to the meaning behind the sticky note. So we look for themes or related areas. We look for a meaning behind, and we cluster them. We look for ways to combine clusters. So if you have 5 or 6 different clusters of sticky notes, you kind of look for ways or areas where you could cluster them together to make a bigger opportunity note. And once you get to a few of the clusters, you start to try to name the clusters. So we usually use a larger sticky note to name it. And then when you're naming it, you're really trying to understand the broader area or the opportunity area that relates to a consumer need. So I gave you the example of authenticity. That is a opportunity area. Convenience is another opportunity area. And typically what we do is we go through this process, and we would, for a big job, we would probably do this for 90 minutes. So it does take a bit of time to kind of work through organizing all the sticky notes into related areas. But then you would actually, as a team, align on what you think the top opportunities are. And this is just a gut feel, and it's in alignment with your teammates on the potential of the area. So then you would typically come out with, what you call your priority opportunity areas. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I do. Just so I'm clear, so you just said that was about 90 minutes, and I just realized I wasn't entirely sure. All of these exercises that you are suggesting, is it generally all done in one day, or are you coming?
No, you come to the workshop with that done. Like exercises 1 to 5 are done. Like you usually would give whoever's leading the process would kind of send out the assignments, right?
Yeah, because I was thinking there's an awful lot of work to get done there in between. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and that's why you have one person responsible for each of those areas. So you have 5 different. Well, and you know what? Some of them might be even more, because the internal and external trends, you might have a couple of people doing that, right? Mm. So yeah, so all of the exercises 1 to 5 are done before the workshop, and then the presentations happen right at the beginning of the workshop, and people are writing down their sticky notes, and then they're pasted to this big sheet of paper, which we call an opportunity map. And then you start kind of moving everything around and trying to find what the themes are. Make sense?
It does to me, yeah.
Okay. So that's the opportunity, kind of like real high level. The next exercise is sharpening the opportunity. So this is where the team aligns on the biggest opportunity areas, and then they start to articulate them. So they kind of capture what the benefits are, what the features might be. And these are still pretty high level. They're not ideas yet. They're opportunity areas and what we call platforms. So I'm going to go back to my authenticity example again, because authenticity is an opportunity area because it's grounded in a consumer need. And then platforms are the ways into that opportunity area. So I gave the example before. Artisan could be a way into authenticity. So artisan products. And that is very different from regionally renowned products, which is also a way into authenticity, which is different, again, from just offering clean labels and simple ingredients. That's a very different area. And so when the beauty of, if you get a big enough opportunity area, the beauty is that you could develop different platforms that will capture different needs, different consumers. So you get scale is what you get, because you're developing areas that different consumers will find worthy. So so this one is where you start to put pen to paper and actually articulate what you think the opportunity and the platforms are. And I'm gonna show you a chart in a minute an example. So if you go to the next slide, so we're kind of winding down now. So the opportunity map can be as simple as just throwing a sheet of paper on the wall and just putting your stickies, just pasted to the map. Here I've shown you the different areas, but you don't have to like the sources of the information, but you don't have to. It's actually better just to randomly place them on the opportunity map. Don't actually place them within where they came from, because you get actual better and divergent opportunities. The next slide is what we call the opportunity development template. So this is where you articulate the opportunity itself. So here is, the target consumer. You talk about the target consumer, life stage, marital status, that type of thing. What the consumer wants from a functional level, and then from an emotional level as well. And then typically we would put some pictures to kind of visualize the opportunity area. So you can imagine what pictures we would put if the opportunity area was authenticity. You could imagine, you could see artisan cheese potentially. You could see, special regional foods, things like that. And then the last piece is that whole platform development. So coming up with platforms that will sort of support this larger opportunity. So those ones, we typically say 4. And then, because especially if you're going into testing, some of them may not do well. So you need enough that you'd have enough if consumers don't actually like the area. So that is pretty much what we were going to cover today. There's a little bit on page 21, there's things to consider. A lot of the stuff, we've kind of covered off throughout. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any questions here now, but I'm thinking maybe it would make a little bit of sense if I took everybody off mute now, and then that would mean that people could just sort of speak up, and if we all start talking over each other, I'll figure out a way to deal with it, but it might be easier and more comfortable. So feel free to just speak out. Any questions from anybody?
So this is Sina talking. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. First off, thank you so much. It was a great presentation. And I was just curious if you've got some more visual presentation or picture of, the boards that you were talking with, the sticky notes, and, how you cluster them. Because the team that I work with, they're located in 3 different countries, basically. And I'm thinking maybe I could do something like that in a storm board, you know, like I'm thinking software. And if I'm not sure how could I do that, because, you know, like physically it's great, you know, if everyone is in the same room and we could do that. But if your team is kind of like not physically present in the same location, how would you suggest to, you know, take that forward?
Yeah, that's a tough one. You know what? Someone had recommended a program that you could do, that you could actually work simultaneously online. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Is that the storm board? Because
that doesn't ring a bell, that name, but let me follow up, because there is some technology that you can do. Like they call it co-creation, but it's very similar, right? Where you can post simultaneous information. Yeah, it would be tough to do unless you have like an online vehicle, right?
I would even say that something like this system that we're using right now for the webinar, you know, it is actually built for teams, and you can share screens back and forth pretty easily with something like that. And I would think if the delegates, you know, were bringing their homework and putting all of that up, I think you could be able to do it, but certainly it would be a lot easier in person, just because it's just so much more spontaneous.
I hear you. The thing is, you know, the fact that, you know, you're sitting and then you're thinking instantly, putting it on a sticky note, stick it on the board, you know, that actually triggers a lot of ideas. And I'm thinking maybe it would be something out there.
It's a good idea.
I think Jared's got an answer too, right, Jared?
Oh, sticky notes for Mac.
Yeah, there's a program built into every Mac called Sticky Notes. You can put literally sticky notes all over the screen. If you could screen share that, which you could, that's kind of a neat thing. I mean, I don't know how many people use Macs, but that's sort of a neat thing.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Anyone else?
Susan, I have another question. So, and maybe you'll get into the next part, but I always wonder about how much you should be wondering what the competition is doing or what's already out there at this stage, because I would think it's kind of super limiting, but on the other hand, you don't want to be going down a path that you haven't checked out. Or do you think you're covering that off in that sort of early stage? I can't remember what number it was, but where you are looking at competitor websites and things like that, or where does that come from?
Yeah, that's in exercise 2. Yeah, maybe I could talk a little bit, but in exercise 2, where you're bringing the outside in, that's where you do a lot of your competitor audit. So yeah, so for example, we did this food company that I worked for, we did a ton of brand, actually even more than brand, category audits. And we looked at the brands within them. Anything from pricing to how do they promote, did they have new products on the shelf, did they have a lot of merchandising in store, like all those things, right? So you'd have to kind of decide on who you want to look at and, you know, what you want to get from those audits. But yeah, typically we would always do some competitor research. And that would come in stage 2. That's why the stage 1 and stage 2, or I should call it exercise 1 and 2, those are pretty big kind of exercises. So you'd probably have a few people contributing in each of those areas.
Okay.
Okay, well, if there isn't anything else, we're going to do 2 weeks from now. Sue, what's the date?
Today is the 6th, so it is the 20th that we are doing our next one.
Yeah, so we're doing phase 2 and phase 3. And that's where we'll start to, because right now we're at a very high level where we have our opportunity areas and our platforms. What we're going to do when we go into stage 2 is we're going to start to converge. And this is where you start to apply your business insights to the opportunity area, because you don't want to go into an area that you actually can't win, execute against, and have resources for. So this is where you start to try to review the opportunity areas with, you know, sort of your business hat, your company hat, and try to distill the ideas that have, you know, the most potential, but then also those that can be executed. And then the last stage is really where you basically start to get to the ideas. So you leverage your platforms and you start to get very concrete about the ideas. So that's basically some creative exercises that we'll go through to generate ideas.